Hello, everyone, and thank you for the Data Team Summit for having us today. I'm Elliot, co-founder and CEO of Anomalo. We are a company that does data quality monitoring for data teams, and I am thrilled to be joined by two Anomalo customers today, Julia from Carta and Stephan from Home2Go. So we'd love to start with some introductions. Maybe we'll start with you, Julia, and then go to Stephan. Tell us who you are and what your role is, and maybe as a fun fact for the audience, tell us about your first job in the data world.
Thanks, Elliot. Hi, everybody. My name is Julia King. I manage a full stack data team at Carta. We're a centralized data team that supports every part of our organization. I've been here for about 2.5 years and done some really interesting things, including implementing Anomalo. Interesting fact, or not interesting, maybe interesting to me, but my first job was a database developer at a music company. It was my first job in San Francisco when I moved many years ago. I started as a kind of database person, and because I knew how to write SQL at the time, moved into the data space just because it was interesting and because nobody else could do it at the time at our company. So that's my story.
All right.
Stephan, what about you?
Yeah, just to continue. Hi, my name is Stephan. I'm at the moment, I'm the director of data analytics at Home2Go. So we are basically a marketplace for vacation rentals. We have a lot of data. And I think the title itself is not completely correct because I'm not looking only into analytics, but we have a data warehouse, a community involved, and we have the data platform team. My first job, I think, wasn't even a title in data. I started as a quantitative risk controller in a bank. That was mainly because I studied math. And interestingly, when I started there before, as a working student, and back in the days they asked me, hey, do you know SQL? Because that was important for them, and luckily at the university there were some courses we as math students were able to attend, so basically that got me the working student position, and that actually finally got me the connection to get my first job. So yeah, never intended to be in data, but that actually happened quite quickly.
Awesome, thank you. I already have a takeaway, which is knowledge of SQL is pretty important. I think still true today, right? So yeah. Good takeaway from both of your careers. So this session is about data teams and how do we build and structure data teams in a modern, flexible way so that they're efficient and can deliver the value that we want out of data and build the data products and gather the insights that we really need as modern companies and modern businesses. So a lot of the questions are going to be on that topic. Would love to start with, give us a quick summary of how the data team is structured at your organization. What is kind of the shape and structure of it? What are the components?
Stephan, do you want to start? Or do you want me to start?
Yeah, I can. I can start. So basically, we did a restructuring in I think in the mid of 2021. So we are currently running a decentralized setup. So basically, our analysts and our analytical engineers, data engineers, are embedded in the domain, and they're actually even reporting into the domain lead. With I would say, I have one-on-ones with all the team leads of the data function within these domains. So it's kind of like a two-head approach. But for us, that was the opportunity basically to be able to scale and to stop having the need for cross-domain prioritization. And I was actually heavily influenced by the book Team Topologies, which was basically talking about this stream-aligned teams versus platform and enablement teams. That being said, this is just working. If you have a platform team, so our platform team is managing the components every domain is using. To basically keep all the domain teams in line, we have something we call it a center of like competency center. You could call it like center of excellence or guild and gang. Like I think there are a couple of names. But yeah, so this is how we do it, and it's not without let's say like learnings along the way, but it's working out pretty decently for us.
We have a different setup. We also have platform teams, basically data engineering, analytics engineering teams that are centralized and supporting everybody, partnering with everybody. Our analytics team is a semi-embedded model, is what we call it, where they do report into one organization, and they are part of one team, but they're dedicated to specific business lines or product lines. And in our case, the prioritization for their work is still done by their partners, but there's a commitment that they'll spend a portion of their time on sort of cross product or cross company projects and priorities. And it also allows us a little bit more flexibility in when business priorities change or anything shifts to be able to reallocate the team based on those priorities. We don't do that often, and obviously it's very disruptive to do that. And you know, there's onboarding, even though you're in the same company, if you move to a different product, like there's still a learning curve, and it's completely seamless, but it does give us that opportunity to be able to adapt to constantly changing priorities. Let's be honest, that's sort of today's world, right? Similar to what Stephan was saying, is like it's not without its challenges. There's pros and cons to either approach. It does seem to work for us relatively well. In addition to being able to adapt to priorities and be able to kind of allocate the team appropriately, what I like is that we can keep the standard of the work delivery very consistent, and there's a lot of career opportunities and growth and learnings on the team that we can facilitate a lot easier in this structure than if the teams were completely kind of separated and reporting into the business or product owners. I do recognize that I think we chatted about it in past meetings, but depending on the size of the team and kind of the type of the organization that you have, there's pros and cons to the approach, and might work better to have a distributed team versus having a team like we do. But that's kind of the world that we live in today.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe let's dig into this topic a little bit more, right? You know, I'm guessing many of the folks in our audience are kind of thinking through, well, how do I structure the data team for me, right? How do I structure the data team for my organization, right? How do I choose between these models? And I definitely feel like the centralized versus embedded question has been around for, 10 plus years, right? That I've seen data teams. So maybe give folks kind of a rubric or a way of thinking about this. When would you be more centralized, and when would you be more embedded when structuring your data teams? Julia, maybe we could start with you.
I think I worked in a couple of companies in my not very long career, but I think I'm a proponent of centralized in general, unless the company is so big or the groups are so big that you have enough structure within the embedded team to support the career growth and the kind of analytics excellence. I've been in situations where the teams were decentralized to an extent where you end up with like 1 or 2 or 3 analysts reporting to a product manager. Right. And that's the case where yes, the product manager has full visibility into what those people are doing and full control over control, meaning, prioritization into the work that they're delivering. But the isolation is real. And I think not being able to turn to somebody for advice and not being able to work with somebody on these problems is a big challenge. So I think the balance in my mind also becomes how big and structured will the team be when you take it out of the centralized team and put it into that business unit or product line. If you can support that, Facebook is decentralized basically, right? But the actual teams are still so big that you basically have this mini organizations within the different product lines. And even then, from my understanding, they've tried to keep it not for each product feature, right? It's still like supporting. Instagram has its own analytics team. It's not Instagram videos versus, you know, whatever the other shopping. So I think, at least that's, again, to my knowledge, I could be making it up. So I think that's kind of one way to think about it. This is why I like the semi-embedded model, where the hope is that the product teams or the business teams still feel like they have control over what work is getting delivered and how, but the opportunity to work with others and having a community that's close to you and learning about what everybody else on the team is working on is beneficial, and hoping to kind of kill the two birds with one stone.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting point. You're kind of saying it's about the size of the embedded unit, right? And is it big enough where now there could be collaboration and career growth within that unit? And if it's not big enough, maybe you should stick with centralized, right? To allow for that collaboration, career growth. Really interesting perspective. Stephan, what about you? It sounds like you made a change recently, so something must have inspired it. Give us a way to think about it.
Yeah. So like, first of all, I really like I don't so I think the discussion is like running in circles, right? Like, once you're going more decentralized, more centralized, for me, actually, it doesn't matter much. It's like about like what's working for you, and for the company itself. First of all, I can totally second the point of don't over embed, to just like by the moment have that like single soldier analyst being completely lost in one of the domains. So basically having a team, and together with having a team having different skill sets together is something important. So basically we would at some point split and further divide into embedded teams, but there's a minimum amount of people you should have. Like if you have like 4 or 5 people in a team, decent, even if they cover more, let's say, like domains, right? So the reason why we decentralized was actually a couple of reasons. That like we had I think centralized team was like 6 to 7 teams, but then you had around 5 to 6 stakeholder teams, and more teams were like more business units and business requests were coming. And one of the fear like I always have is that sometimes analytics or like data is more treated as in a very transactional fashion. And they did the OKR planning, right? And then out of the sudden you get like requests on your table. Nobody basically like asked you for that before upfront, and you're like, okay, like how should I am supposed to plan that? So one of the goals for getting business and the data function closer together is about like having a better planning process, being able to more proactively shaping the agenda, North Star metrics, what do we actually want to measure, right? And I realized that if you go into a domain where, let's say, like being data informed is like very crucial in your day to day. So let's say like you go into marketing, right? Like the playbook, the metrics, and everything of that. Like everyone in the business needs to know that, and they are very data informed already. Then it gets easier because you have people on the other side who have that can have business context and usage of data together. I think we learned that if you embed data people into a team where the data literacy is not that high, it will take a little bit more of iteration to actually understand like how to work together. So I think these were the learnings. Overall, that being close in the planning process and being more flexible from like other resources from other teams, these are for us like the biggest advantages.
That's
and Julia, like what you said, right? Like I think this is like totally fair in the decentralized model. It's like with microservices, right? Like you split everything into smaller services. You need to have an orchestration layer around. So if we want to develop people, you need to do pair programming across the domains, right? You need to have a community that is keeping people and stuff in place. So it's actually pretty similar to how you shape systems, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the microservices analogy. I feel like that's another one that's been going on for 10 plus years, which is how small are the microservices, right? And what can we manage? But that's a great point, Stephan, on, one of the advantages of the embedded model is that alignment, right? That kind of seat at the table that the data folks now get. as part of that product team, where they can participate in planning and prioritization, those kind of things, and be ready to assist with that. So that's a great point. Let's switch topics a little bit. Let's talk about the actual roles on your team, who the people are and what their skill sets are. And so maybe let's start at a very high level. One thing that I've been seeing with data teams is their push for folks on data teams to do more, right? To work all across the stack, right? It's not enough to be a data scientist or an analyst while you're expected to do some data engineering too, right? As part of getting your data working, you're maybe expected to do some machine learning, all these kinds of things. So there's been a real push I've seen in the last few years in terms of folks becoming generalists that can do it all, right? How are you building your teams today? Are you in favor of generalists? Are you in favor of specialists? Is there some distinction between the two, or some best practice for how to build a team? Julia, maybe let's start with you again.
Why am I going first? I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking.
You'll be second next time.
No, it's okay. No, I'm happy to. I agree with you. I think there has been a lot of a push into more of sort of data scientists, really, is the role that's become kind of a catch-all, at least in my experience, become a catch-all role for, you're expected to do some predictive modeling, but also dashboards and build the ETLs and be able to get the data into the warehouse. So like a lot of bits and pieces of it are, have traditionally been done by other teams like data engineering. The way that I think about it is, I think it's very useful for data professionals to understand the scope of the whole world of what data means. I think it's impossible to be great at everything. It's really, really hard. Being able to self-service though, and be able to build something and unblock yourself, I think is important. We move way too fast to be able to wait for a perfectly built pipeline that maybe data engineering is able to provide, and maybe not perfectly built pipeline that data scientists can build, and that works good enough and allows them to provide whatever insight that they need to provide is perfectly fine. So I think it's not always a clear answer of which way it should be done. I think it's more about what are the immediate priorities and kind of what helps unblock the business. The way that I think about building the team though is even in that world, we do have the data engineering team that is responsible for building better quality and reliable pipelines, and do a lot of the other kind of infrastructure work that data scientists can do. We do have analytics engineers who are really masters of traditional data modeling and kind of concepts of what data warehousing means. And then we do have machine learning engineering teams sort of on the other side of data scientists of building more advanced predictive models. And so for data scientists, they partner with all of those teams. We expect them to be able to build some of it on their own and unblock themselves. But at the same time, when I look at our data science team, we definitely have people with the same title that specialize and have slightly different skill set. There are some people who are definitely more math background, predictive analytics oriented. We have some people who are really moving closer to data engineering in terms of kind of their interest in what they like to do. And so we try to build the team in that way too. As we hire the next person, we think about who do we have on the team, which area are they going to support, and what is the need in that area to look for that slightly different skill set. So, and then allow them to maybe learn, these other skill sets if they don't have them already. And then the last thing I would say is some of that also relates to seniority, I think. You definitely maybe start out with, just SQL. I have a lot of respect for SQL, so I don't take that lightly, but being able to manipulate the data and understand it and build some of the views of the data is very important. But then as you continue to grow in your career as a data scientist, and at some point maybe tap out of it potentially, is you get closer to machine learning and predictive work, or maybe you get closer to data engineering and some of the kind of more technical infrastructure work, and continue to sort of grow up in your career and potentially trying to figure out what is it that you want to do.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Stephan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like not much to add. I think the ultimate answer, it depends, right? It depends on, let's say, like if I would start like a team having like for a new product or new area, I would of course like always go for the generalist because of like simply being able to get things out fast. Then while maturing the team and then the team is growing, usually there's some kind of specialization. My famous example is always yes, there's a lot of A/B testing going around in the product space, but I can't expect from all the analysts, for example, like being able to understand all the developments in the statistics space, right? Usually you would say, I want to have that one expert telling you what's the power test here? What do you actually need? Oh, you need to wait for 3 years of data until this test comes into significance, right? So like stuff like this. So I think at the end, you need to look at the skill sets of the whole team. And based on that, you want to build a certain maturity in ETL, in analytics, in machine learning, in data science. And usually if you start with a small team, you would rather try to match these boxes with like 1 or 2 or 3 people, and that's why you go for more for the horizontal skill set, right? And then if you have 6, 7, 8, you're actually finally able then to get the experts into it. So I think for me really depends on the use case. I like both because they both have a like very high value. And one thing I just recently read from Kent Beck about like a piece of assignment versus sign up. And I think having the ability to have people in the team to start as generalists, to then actively see this, I want to try this, I love it, I want to go for that. This is actually, from a development perspective, like a great thing to allow in teams, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the kind of the role of team maturity, right, and team scale and making these decisions is a good one to take away from both of your comments. As a former product manager, I could tell you that I both loved and hated having the A/B testing statistical expert on the team, because my tests were always underpowered. It was always going to take longer, but of course it's important to get that stuff right. So that's great. Stephan, over to you. Talking more about kind of team structure a little bit. Are there any data team titles, right, or recent developments in data team titles that have surprised you?
I would say surprise is the wrong word. I feel like more and more lost in a sense of like that there was always like new labels coming up, and like I recently had to Google the job title when it means I'm a citizen data scientist, and I was like, what does a citizen mean? And this is, I learned this is about if people don't have a statistical like background or like a math background, and I was like, oh, do we need to classify that? So I think that like everyone is like trying to find the fancy job title, the good label that attracts people. And we usually, what we do when we do a data introduction, we explain people how we interpret these roles. For example, at Home to Go, what is a data analyst, what is an analytical engineer, what is a data platform engineer, and where do they overlap? Because honestly, it like how you get basically like socialized with these titles really like heavily depends on the company where you used to work before. So I usually don't care what people write in this CV. I'm then rather more interested in the skill set.
Yeah, I'm totally adding citizen data scientist to my LinkedIn profile. Julia, what about you on titles?
I've with you. I've never heard that one before either. And I totally agree with Stephan. I think is the titles have become so specific to the company you're at, that they don't necessarily always mean much once you leave. So looking at what people can do and what their technical or business skills are much more important. The last one, I mean, this was a bit ago, but analytics engineer was the one that I actually genuinely didn't know what it was either. And to me, what I'm realizing is a lot of the titles and specializations are sort of coming back, like the full swing of BI used to be, and the kind of traditional data warehouse used to be all the rage, and then it became a dirty word. Nobody wanted to do it. And now kind of swinging back was analytics engineering being really, I think, most closely aligned to what BI and ETL developers used to be, but you don't call that anymore because nobody's going to apply for that role. Analytics engineering just sounds way, way cooler. And so I think, it does also feel like the titles get invented to sound more exciting, but the work seems to be still kind of similar to what it used to be. And it just the more about, which side of the swing are we on of traditional architecture just kind of driven work versus, the data scientists can build it all, and we don't really need all of these roles. We just need one, and everybody can build an ETL. It's just SQL, and it's kind of that mindset. But at the end of the day, really very similar to Stephan, like kind of ignoring the titles, at least when we're interviewing people, in terms of assuming that we know what they do based on what their title was in the previous company. That definitely learned that we need to do that. And then explaining how we think about these titles at Carta.
Yeah, makes sense. So we only have a few minutes left. So I wanted to kind of jump back to talking about your careers, and maybe try to get some advice for folks that maybe are starting their journey in data today. So Julia, you actually started as essentially what today we might call a data engineer. It wasn't called that back in the day, but today we might call it a data engineer. Was that a good place to start? Was that role similar to what's going on today, or is it really different?
It's a bit different because I think, just the number of tools and solutions we have out now is very different than what we had when I started out, where everything was a shell script and a cron job. So I think just, how deep do you need to go into certain areas is different. I think it is a great place to start because in my mind, it provides that foundation from which you can jump into the different branches of the data world, or you can stay in data engineering and continue growing there as well. So I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I feel like the most successful data people I've seen are people who have at least an understanding of what happens in the whole of the data team, not just in their area. And so it's not even about the specific job you will start in. It's really more about, can you join a team or an organization that allows you to have insight and maybe try out this different types of work to help you figure out what you're going to enjoy, because you don't know that until you try it.
Yeah, for sure. Stephan, over to you. You started as a risk modeler in banking, which sounds like a nice generalist role in the banking sector. Was that a good place to start your career?
I mean, I guess I have a heavy survival bias. Because yes,
as do we all.
Obviously it was the greatest choice of my life. I mean, it was like pretty random and luck, right? But I mean, yeah. So I mean, for me, the most important thing is like especially when you're starting your career, like what is the exposure to to work that you can have? And I mean, like I got raw data from Oracle. I did modeling in SAS. I did programming in MATLAB, right? So like all of that shaped my my opportunities to understand what I really like. So I would always ideally try to find something where I get this exposure. That doesn't necessarily mean that I would now apply for a dedicated role, because I think there's a big bunch of like being curious and like looking what other people are doing and talking and right. But I think if you start young, I would always go for generalists, because you need to know the environment to see what you would like to specialize on.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, we're coming up on our time. Thank you so much for a great conversation, Stephan and Julia. And thank you so much to the Data Team Summit for having us here today.
Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.